The sound of the word hit harder than any slap could. Next. The bank teller's voice was sharp, dismissive, and loud enough that heads turned inside the crowded downtown branch. Naomi Clark froze. She had been standing at the counter for nearly 10 minutes, waiting patiently while the teller flipped through her documents, typed half-heartedly into the computer, and sighed dramatically as though Naomi's very presence was an inconvenience. Finally, without even looking her in the eye, the teller slid the papers back across the counter. "I said next," the teller repeated coldly. "We can't process this. Try another branch." Naomi felt her chest tighten. "But, everything is here," she said softly, holding the folder closer. "My ID, the business registration, the tax records." The teller cut her off, her lips twisting into a sneer. "Ma'am, I don't think you understand. We don't open that kind of account here. You can try community banks in your area, but this branch isn't for everyone." The words dripped with the kind of poison Naomi had tasted before. Not for everyone. Around her, the wealthy clients in line, men in designer suits, women clutching handbags worth more than her car, stared at her like she was out of place. Like she was trespassing in their world. Her throat burned, but she held her ground. "Excuse me? I have a right to open a business account here. My company is legitimate." The teller leaned forward, lowering her voice, though the condescension still cut like glass. "Ma'am, don't make a scene. Security can escort you out if necessary." Naomi's stomach dropped. A rush of heat flooded her face as she glanced over her shoulder. Sure enough, the security guard at the door was already watching her, hand resting on his belt. Humiliation wrapped itself around her like a noose. She gathered her papers, her hands trembling, and backed away from the counter. The whispers followed her. "She probably doesn't even have the money. Scammers are everywhere these days. Look at her clothes, what did she expect?" Naomi fought to keep her eyes dry, but as soon as she stepped outside into the harsh glare of the afternoon sun, the tears came. She pressed her folder to her chest like it was the last piece of her dignity, her mind racing. She wasn't some fraud. She wasn't some charity case. She was a businesswoman. And today the bank had made her feel like she was nothing. But deep down, Naomi didn't know that this moment, this sting of rejection and shame, was the very spark that would ignite a fire so powerful, it would change not only her life, but the life of every person who ever thought they could keep her in her place. Naomi sat in her small apartment that night, staring at the unopened letter on the kitchen table. It was from the State Housing Board, a reply to the application she had spent weeks filling out. She didn't have the courage to open it yet. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around a chipped mug of tea. Every corner of that apartment carried the story of her struggle. The leaky faucet that dripped no matter how many times she tightened it. The stack of unpaid utility bills she shuffled every month, trying to decide which one could wait another week. The empty spot on the shelf where she used to keep pictures of her mother before they were lost in the move. Naomi was only 35, but hardship had aged her spirit more than her face. Her hair, neatly braided, carried the shine of discipline rather than luxury. She had grown up in a small neighborhood where dreams were spoken of in whispers, as if too much hope might invite disappointment. And yet Naomi had clung to her dream, that one day she would own her own home. Not just for herself but for her son Jordan. Jordan was 11, smart as a whip, with a love for books that made his teachers beam with pride. Naomi often said, "If I can just get us into a stable home, he'll have a foundation." A chance I never had. That was why she had walked into that bank earlier, holding her head high despite the world trying to push it down. She wasn't there to ask for a handout. She was there to claim what she had earned. But instead of dignity, she was served shame. The next morning, Naomi returned to the bank, determination stiffening her spine. She wore her best outfit, a neatly pressed blouse, slacks, and the same second-hand blazer she wore to every important occasion. She knew the odds weren't in her favor, but she couldn't let fear win. She walked up to the same counter, facing the same manager, Miss Porter. The woman's cold smile greeted her like an icy handshake. "Oh, you again." Naomi swallowed her pride. "Yes, ma'am. I've brought all the paperwork you asked for. Proof of income, bank statements, references. Everything." She laid the folder down gently on the counter. Miss Porter didn't even look at it. She folded her arms. "And I already told you, we don't have the type of loan you're asking for." Naomi's voice cracked, but she didn't back down. "That can't be true. I did my research. I meet the requirements. Please at least look at the application." The people in line behind her shifted, whispering, watching the confrontation. Miss Porter raised her voice, not to clarify but to humiliate. "Miss Brooks, you don't belong here. Maybe try a credit union in your neighborhood. This bank is for serious clients. We don't bend rules for people who don't fit the profile." That last phrase landed like a punch. Naomi felt her cheeks burn, her throat tighten. Every eye in the bank felt like a spotlight. She could almost hear the unspoken words underneath. "People like you." She gathered her papers slowly, her fingers trembling, but before she could step away, something unexpected happened. A voice rose from across the lobby. "That's not how you treat a customer." Heads turned. A man in a gray suit stepped forward. He was tall, confident, with the calm authority of someone used to being obeyed. He looked directly at Miss Porter, then at Naomi, then back again. Miss Porter stiffened. "And who are you to interfere in bank business?" The man smiled faintly, pulling something from his pocket. A black leather wallet. He flipped it open, revealing a gleaming badge. The room fell silent. Naomi's heart skipped. This was no ordinary customer. This was someone with power. The bank had tried to strip Naomi of her dignity in front of strangers. But one stranger was about to change everything. The silence in the bank was suffocating. Even the sound of the ticking clock on the wall seemed louder than usual. Every customer, every teller, every security guard froze as the man in the gray suit held his badge out for all to see. Miss Porter's voice wavered for the first time. "And who exactly are you?" The man's tone was calm, but his words carried weight. "Marcus Reynolds, State Banking Compliance Division. I oversee how institutions like this one handle customers' rights. And I don't like what I'm seeing." Gasps rippled through the lobby. Naomi's eyes widened. She had expected humiliation, maybe even to be escorted out. But this was a twist she never could have scripted. Miss Porter's forced smile returned, but the confidence behind it had cracked. "Mr. Reynolds, surely you misunderstand. This woman doesn't qualify for the kind of loan she's demanding. We have standards here. Procedures." Marcus didn't blink. He turned his gaze toward Naomi. "Ma'am, did you bring the documents she requested?" Naomi, still trembling, held up the folder. "Yes, sir. Everything. Income verification, references, bank statements." She wouldn't even look at them. Marcus extended his hand. Naomi placed the folder in it, her heart pounding as though she had just passed off something sacred. He opened it, scanning the pages quickly, his brow furrowing deeper with every line. When he finally looked up, his voice cut through the air like a blade. "She's qualified. More than qualified. In fact, based on these numbers, you should have approved her on the spot." The lobby erupted in whispers. Miss Porter's face flushed. "Now wait just a moment." But Marcus wasn't finished. He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough that every ear strained to hear. "What I see here is a violation of state anti-discrimination policies. You denied her not because of her paperwork, but because of who she is. Do you understand how serious that is?" Naomi's knees felt weak. For the first time in years, someone was standing up for her. Not behind closed doors, not with polite excuses, but openly, unapologetically. Miss Porter's hands trembled as she tried to gather her composure. "This is all a misunderstanding. We don't discriminate. Our bank serves everyone." Marcus folded his arms, unimpressed. "Then you won't mind if I file an immediate investigation. Starting with you." The crowd was no longer whispering. They were watching like spectators at a trial, their expressions a mix of shock, satisfaction, and curiosity. The very humiliation Naomi had suffered only minutes earlier had now shifted entirely onto Miss Porter. Naomi took a slow breath. For once, the shame wasn't hers to carry. But just as relief began to wash over her, another shadow entered the room. The glass doors swung open, and a man in a charcoal suit strode in with an entourage. His presence demanded attention. Tall, broad-shouldered, his graying hair slicked back, his cufflinks glinting like silver. He was the kind of man who had built his empire by crushing anyone who dared stand in his way. Everyone recognized him instantly. Charles Whitfield, the bank's regional president. And judging by the scowl on his face, he was already aware of the scene unfolding inside his branch. Miss Porter's relief was palpable. She straightened, her voice suddenly syrupy sweet. "Mr. Whitfield, thank goodness you're here. We're just dealing with a minor misunderstanding." Marcus didn't flinch. He held his ground as Whitfield approached, his footsteps echoing on the polished marble floor. Naomi's heart sank. She had just begun to feel hope, and now the most powerful man in the building was staring her down like prey. Whitfield's voice was low, deliberate, almost theatrical. "I don't know who you think you are," he said, glaring at Marcus, But in my bank, I decide what qualifies as business. Not some clipboard regulator, and certainly not some desperate customer trying to play victim. His eyes cut to Naomi, sharp as glass. And if you don't walk out of here right now, Miss Brooks, I promise you, you'll regret it. Naomi had faced humiliation before. But now, the full weight of a billionaire banker's power was bearing down on her. Would she crumble, or would she finally find the courage to fight back? The bank lobby fell into a chilling silence. Charles Whitfield's words hung in the air like a guillotine. His glare alone could have sent most people running. Naomi Brooks, a 29-year-old black woman who had spent her whole life being underestimated, felt her pulse racing in her ears. Regret it? The words echoed inside her mind, heavy, threatening, suffocating. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her worn leather purse. Every instinct screamed at her to lower her head, to leave quietly, to avoid further shame. That was what life had taught her. Survive by swallowing your pride. But then she looked at Marcus Reynolds. The state banking compliance officer stood tall, arms folded, eyes fixed on Whitfield without a hint of fear. He wasn't backing down. Not an inch. And something inside Naomi cracked open, something she had buried for years. The belief that she deserved to stand tall too. Naomi straightened her back. She lifted her chin. And for the first time, her voice didn't tremble. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not leaving." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Miss Porter nearly dropped her clipboard. Whitfield's jaw tightened. "Excuse me?" Naomi's eyes locked with his, steady, unflinching. "You told me I'd regret staying here. But I've regretted staying silent all my life. Not anymore. You don't get to decide my worth. You don't get to bury my dreams because of the color of my skin." Her words, raw and powerful, cut through the marble lobby like thunder. For the first time, the entire bank was listening to her. Whitfield sneered. "Save the speeches. This is business. Cold numbers. You'll never get a loan from me. Never." Marcus stepped forward, his voice calm but lethal. "Actually, you're not the one who decides that anymore. I am." He pulled out his phone, snapped a photo of Ms. Porter and Whitfield, and began recording. "Consider this official notice. As of right now, I'm filing a full investigation into Whitfield Bank's lending practices. And based on what I've seen here today, I'd say we're looking at multiple violations of state and federal law." The crowd erupted in whispers, phones lifted as customers began filming too. Suddenly, Whitfield's polished power looked less like dominance and more like desperation. "You wouldn't dare," Whitfield hissed. Marcus smiled faintly. "Try me." Within weeks, the investigation spread like wildfire. News crews camped outside Whitfield Bank. Whistleblowers came forward with stories of minority customers being denied loans without reason. Lawsuits piled up. Whitfield's empire, once untouchable, was crumbling brick by brick. And Naomi? She stood taller than ever. The same cameras that once would have caught her shame now captured her triumph. Reporters asked about her story and she told it, not as a victim but as a survivor who refused to stay silent. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, Naomi unlocked the door to a building she never thought she'd own. The sign above the entrance gleamed in fresh paint. Brooks Financial Services. Her own small lending office. A place where people like her, people who had been told no too many times, would finally hear yes. Months later, Naomi walked past the same bank that once humiliated her. The building looked smaller now. A for sale sign hung in the window. Whitfield himself was nowhere to be seen. His name tarnished, his legacy stained. Naomi paused, a quiet smile spreading across her face. Not out of revenge but out of triumph. Because she knew something now that no one could ever take from her. Her voice mattered. Discrimination, injustice, humiliation. These are the battles many face in silence. But Naomi's story reminds us that silence only feeds the oppressor. The moment you rise, the moment you say, enough, is the moment you reclaim your power. No matter how small or powerless you may feel, remember, truth has a way of breaking through walls money and privilege try to build. And sometimes justice doesn't come with a whisper, it comes with a roar. What about you? If you were in Naomi's shoes, standing in that bank with the weight of power pressing down on you, would you have found the courage to fight back? Let us know in the comments below. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, don't just watch in silence. Hit that subscribe button, join our community, and help us keep exposing the struggles, the resilience, and the victories that shape our world. Because justice doesn't just belong in courtrooms. It belongs in our lives, in our voices, and in our choices.